for white people who are trying to engage in the Black Lives Matter movement. So just so you know what the audience primarily was in that space, were white people engaged in this movement. And that, she's just so awesome. I feel really safe here. So I just want to, first, we're not going to reflect on what we heard because, but we're going to do a quick shout out. Something you heard, something you took away, something you heard in what she said. So you can just popcorn, shout them out.
Need for accountability.
What's that? Need for accountability?
Defects.
Defects.
Diversity.
Diversity? Okay.
Follow Black
Complexity?
leadership. Follow Black leadership in this movement.
Targeted destruction of communities.
What's happening now?
Strategy.
Fight like hell for Black Lives Now.
While obviously all lives matter, Black lives matter.
System. What was that?
Changing the system.
Organizing based on our complexities and understandings.
Go ahead. Okay, thank you. Anything else?
Liberation struggle.
Liberation struggle.
I think she said something about don't get hung up on tactics, you need a strategy.
Okay, yeah. Don't have narrow conversations about.
Or don't let those conversations like take over the entire like conversation. This is the whole space.
There's room for everything.
Just shout out. You're not raising hands. Yeah.
Like lumping together marginalized groups is like silencing them.
She said lumping together marginalized groups is what?
Like silencing.
Silencing them. So that our particularities that the experience is different. Okay, great. So now we're gonna do sort of a similar thing, just shouting out, but this is sort of thoughts that came out of this, right? What questions, and we're not gonna answer them right now. We're just using this as a space to sort of throw some ideas out, throw some questions out, which hopefully later on, when we get to the next parts of our agenda, we will get to answer. But right now, we're not trying to discuss or answer them. Just what questions do you have about white people's role in this movement?
I didn't hear anything about strategy other than we need it.
Okay, so your question is, what is our strategy?
Other than really amorphously, we need movement.
Okay.
My question would be, what does support for Black leadership in Gainesville look like? Can we get a little bit more specific about that and how we can participate?
Other questions?
Where's the line for like helping and overstepping your boundaries? Because I feel like that should be.
What if I am uncomfortable with particular tactics?
I can't hear.
Okay, so if everybody could just really speak up, and I'll, if you need to, look at me and I'll repeat it for you. I'll repeat things for you as well. Other questions about the role of white people in the Black Lives Matter movement, or in other social change movements?
White people's behavior at the marches and rallies.
What should that look like?
Yeah.
I have a question about accountability, and when accountability, like that check-in process, becomes too much of a burden for Black leadership, right? Because that is, it takes time to check white people, and I don't think that Black leaders should always be spending their time doing that, because that centers whiteness. So that's my question. Any other?
Yeah, and also the most effective way is to check each other while still, like it's our job to check each other, but we still can't just rely on our own judgment of what needs to be checked. Like we still have to be accountable to people of color in the balance there.
Julia, did you want to?
Yeah.
I feel like you know, it's our responsibility to teach and enlighten other white people. And I don't know exactly how to go about it, because there's a lot of people who need a lot of teaching.
And also, actually, yeah, about how to pick your battles as a white person, because I feel like we have, you know, a certain level of privileged access to white people whose minds need changing, but like, does that mean we're not allowed to give up on our crazy uncle? Are we allowed to?
How to create the growth zone and give support to our friends while still, like, how does that look while still acknowledging the anger and frustration of another person and not devaluing?
Yes.
What do we know about the depth of racism in our own culture?
How do I unlearn white as default?
Sorry,
How
again?
do I unlearn white as default?
How do we teach our white children this before they're sitting in these meetings with their
One or two more?
How do you reach white people in a way that they'll listen?
More specific version of that, maybe. Over the holidays, talking to extended family members who not allied, what I noticed afterwards thinking about it was that a common thread in myriad arguments and talking points that I heard seemed to be my life. I mean, the various family members saying, my life is tough, my people I know's life is tough. Why would I give extra sympathy to somebody else whose life is tough when mine is too, and the people I know is too? And so they're not, I mean, they're totally not seeing it in terms of a different privilege, or a different level of, putting the same thing backwards, a different level of sucking. And without, when there's not the opportunity to put somebody through a long, rethinking process, are there anybody's suggestions for shorter things to do?
Good question. Great. So we're gonna keep all of these questions in mind. So many of these questions are things I'm like, oh man, yeah, it's so hard to go home and try to be like, let's talk about Thanksgiving with family, and everybody's like, gosh, why can't you just like enjoy this holiday? Definitely like resonate with a lot of those questions you all brought up. So thank you. Okay, so we're gonna watch two more short clips from the same panel of two other organizers who have been involved in the Black Lives Matter movement. Who are going to speak a little bit more specifically about white people's role in the movement, and then we're going to explore those questions together.
We really have to look at systemically, where are the places where racism is embedded and how is that being exercised against people, and how do we push back against those policies? Like, we have an opportunity to do that right now, right? And that's one of the opportunities of the moment, is for us to really get comfortable with the fact that racism exists. Make other people comfortable with that shit. I'm sorry, make other people comfortable with it. Because the fact is that you cannot grow up in American society and not be shaped by racism, because racism is at the very core and being of this country. Every value that is held, every institution that has been set up with that in mind. Capitalism is inherently racist. And in some ways, I feel like I'm stating the obvious, but I think that these obvious things are the things that we need people to be talking to folks about when people want to say, oh, it's a post-racial society, right? People want to be like, oh, Obama's the president. That doesn't matter. it actually doesn't matter, right? Class ascendancy and those things does not get rid of the fact that racism exists and is an intrinsic part of this society. And so those are the conversations that we really want folks to be having. And as you're having those conversations about racism and thinking about that, really thinking about internally, how have you internalized that in yourself as well, right? And getting comfortable with that. It's an uneasy place to be in. I have internalized oppressions. It's an uneasy place to be in, to work through those internalized oppressions. But what we have to do at this moment to move forward is we have to get comfortable with what's uncomfortable, right? One of the biggest things about the BART shutdown that I take away from it, and somebody wrote this really fabulous letter about being inconvenienced, and it really, it's really made me think about the fact that justice is not going to be convenient for any of us. And racism has not been convenient for Black folks, especially in this country, right? Right? Racism has been inconvenience to me my whole life. So yes, justice is going to be inconvenient. And that's a part of what our work is, and a part of what we're doing at this moment through the actions that we're taking. Is we're inconveniencing folks that aren't used to being inconvenienced. Because it's time for us to all get uncomfortable, right? Because change is hard, but change is coming now, right? And we have to push for that change, and we have to be comfortable in that change in order for us to best situate ourselves to build the type of movement that's going to be led by Black folks for Black liberation. But really, once Black people are liberated, that really is a liberation of all people. Right?
Okay, so that was Robbie Clark from Blackout Collective, which was instrumental in the Oakland BART station shutdowns. And now we're going to hear from Kamal Walton, who's been involved, references at the beginning briefly this action called Black Brunch, which happened in some of the wealthy white suburbs around Oakland, where Black activists and organizers went into places where people were having brunch and stopped everyone and had them listen to the names of Black lives that have been lost.
Lord, I am getting so heated right now. It has been a very long and intense and powerful last few weeks, and so I'm carrying all of that with me in this moment. So there have also been lots of conversations with Black folks and other folks of color in these last few weeks, taking all of these things into consideration, trying to weigh out the types of privileges that we do and don't have, the resources that we do and don't have access to, and lots of conversations with white folks about, what can I do? In addition to throwing down with critical resistance and Black folks shutting down West Oakland BART, I was also a part of this this crew that hadn't had an action called Black Brunch. Yes. And as the security person taking up the back, making sure that none of our folks were left behind, I was usually the last person that white folks in Rockridge saw, and they were saying thank you and like, what can I do? It's like, where can I donate? And asked me what my story was, and I was like, actually, I don't have time to give you my story, and I don't owe you my story, and maybe you need to figure out what your story is. But so in thinking about that, and I'm not sure where the slogans came from. There have been a couple of different conversations that have come up. So one is with the slogan that silence is violence, which is definitely true. White people need to continue to have conversations around like where their privilege and where their place is in the larger scheme of things, and the amount of power and skills and resources that are held in order to leverage the work of people of color and Black folks in particular. But I think it needs to be pushed from conversation to action. And I think that has come up in the last few days is just the idea that complacency is consent. And in thinking about how to go beyond our comfort zones, how to get uncomfortable, I think, you know, lots of times people can have conversations and say, you know, oh, I talked about it, so I'm not being violent. But actually, I am concretely looking for some white folks who are throwing down and putting their bodies on the line as much as every single Black person is stepping outside of their house every single day. And I think that looks like a lot of different things. Organizing is not one particular way, but I think it requires a serious conversation on what skills, resources, and privilege are held that can be propelling the work of Black people. I think that means that sometimes silence is necessary because you need to listen to the leadership of those in the communities where you are. I think it's important to acknowledge that we are in the Bay. And there are certainly groups of white folks, thanks to the Catalyst Project and the White Noise Collective, who have been having these conversations already about how white folks can be more accountable to people of color. And so thinking about how to push it more to action is really important. And I don't have that answer for you in this moment. But I think that means that we all need to be thinking more creatively about, number one, who we should be going to. So that doesn't just mean going to your one Black friend and asking them what you should do. That means assessing, like educating yourselves on what work has already been happening in the city of Oakland to support Black communities for a long, long time. Because in addition to, you know, the Blackout Collective, which is throwing down and supporting Black people in escalating and doing direct action where we live, which is really important because a lot of times communities of color and organizations that serve communities of color do not have the resources to do that. That is also a very new group. The Black Organizing Project has been here for a minute. Black Alliance for Just Immigration has been here for a minute. Cause of Who's to Just Cause has been here for a minute. And there are a lot more organizations that require people to self-educate. Because also in this moment, it is very crucial that Black people are throwing down with our folks to train up to get the skills that we need to support one another in this really rough time. And so it's really important that white people challenge themselves and educate themselves, and this is a great example of that. And I have more to say, but I'm also feeling really ranty, and so I'm going to wrap up there and then come back with more composed thoughts.